Chapter 21. The Village Scene of Death. I turned just in time to see the villagers carrying old Grandpa Wong's body out of the ditch. Only then did I remember Fatty. He was lying flat on the ground, trembling all over, too weak to move. His rear end was swollen red where the rooster had pecked him. It looked truly pitiful, almost tragic. Yet, in a twisted way, the sight was so ridiculous that it was unforgettable. "Ooh, bro, help me up," he whimpered, tears streaming down his face. "I want to go home." It took everything I had to pull him to his feet. The wound hurt so badly he couldn't even pull up his pants. I had to hold him up by the shoulders while he hunched over, taking tiny, miserable steps towards the village. When we reached the entrance, a group of middle-aged aunties were just coming back from the fields, hose slung over their shoulders. The moment they saw Fatty's strange posture, they rushed over. "What happened to him?" one of them asked. I sighed. "He got packed by a rooster." The words had barely left my mouth before all of them froze in disbelief, like they'd just been struck by lightning. They had lived their whole lives in this village and seen all sorts of odd things, but this? A rooster pecking a boy's butt until he couldn't walk? That was new. They circled around Fatty, examining him from every angle, whispering to each other as if he were some rare specimen. Poor Fatty could only bend over in humiliation, enduring their curious stares. At last, they unanimously concluded that I should take him to the village clinic to have the wound disinfected. I had no choice. Supporting Fatty's weight, I half-dragged him through the dusty path towards the clinic. On the way, we ran into quite a few villagers. Every single one of them stopped, stared, and after hearing what had happened, burst into uncontrollable laughter. To put it in modern terms, Fatty had become the unwilling protagonist of the most humiliating scene in the entire village. Some even laughed while saying, "Poor kid, but honestly, this is too funny to bear." I could understand their reaction, but Fatty couldn't. "How can you people laugh at me like this?" he shouted, tears and snot mixing on his face. "Don't you have any sympathy?" By the time we reached the clinic, both of us were drenched in sweat. The village clinic wasn't really a clinic at all. It was just a converted room inside a farmer's courtyard. The owner, Liu was the second son in his family, hence the nickname Brother Liu II. He'd graduated from medical school 2 years earlier and returned home to open this small clinic. The moment we stepped into the yard, his big yellow dog came bounding out, circling us twice before shoving its nose right at Fatty's rear to sniff. I quickly kicked it away. Brother Liu was busy in the yard. Seeing me help Fatty inside, he hurried over. "What happened?" "He got pecked by a rooster," I said. Brother Liu froze, then burst out laughing so hard bubbles came from his nose. "So that blood-curdling scream was from you, huh? Scared me half to death. I thought someone was being murdered. Come on, let me take a look." He helped Fatty lie face down on a long wooden bench. Then he went inside and returned with a bottle of potassium permanganate solution, the purple disinfectant. But when he saw Fatty's injury, he nearly lost his breath laughing again. "Good heavens, kid! Did you even wipe your ass? What's this yellow stuff?" "Never mind, gotta clean it up first." He told me to fetch a basin of water. When I brought it, he soaked cotton with tongs and began cleaning the wound. Fatty lay there like a dead dog, limp and miserable. Oddly enough, as Brother Liu wiped the wound, he started feeling better, almost relaxed. He didn't even cry out. After a while, Brother Liu said, "Hold on tight, I'm going to disinfect it now." He poured the purple solution directly on the wound. The area was swollen and raw, and the moment the liquid touched it, Fatty screamed in agony, nearly jumping off the bench. "It burns! Stop! Stop it!" He clutched his backside, refusing to let the doctor touch him again. "Hey, let go!" Brother Liu scolded. "If we don't disinfect this properly, it'll get infected." He tried persuading him for a while, but Fatty refused to release his grip. Finally, Brother Liu lost his patience. "Ooh, go inside and grab me some rope." I blinked. "You're not seriously—" "Do it!" A minute later, Fatty's wrists and ankles were tied to the legs of the bench. He screamed like a pig being slaughtered, so Brother Liu grabbed a roll of medical tape and plastered it over his mouth for good measure. Still unsatisfied, he wound a few more loops of rope around Fatty's waist. Now completely immobilized, Fatty could only whimper as Brother Liu finally managed to pour the disinfectant on the wound. When it was done, Brother Liu wiped his hands and glanced at his yellow dog, which was wagging its tail hungrily. "There are some leftover buns on the table inside," he said. "Go feed the dog while I fetch the antibiotics." I nodded and went into the house to get the buns. Brother Liu headed toward the medicine cabinet. Neither of us realized that the true nightmare was about to begin. Fatty couldn't move or make a sound, but his ears still worked fine. He heard the distant cock-a-doodle-doo of a rooster. He turned his head slightly and froze. Perched on the courtyard fence was that same rooster, the very one that had attacked him earlier. If he'd been free, he would have leapt up and fought it to the death, no doubt about it. But now he was tied up like a pig waiting for slaughter, completely helpless. The rooster tilted its head, glaring at him with one beady eye. Then, flapping its wings, it jumped down into the yard. At that exact moment, I stepped out of the house holding the buns and witnessed a scene straight out of hell. Drawn by the smell of the disinfectant, the rooster darted forward. Before I could shout, it struck. 3 vicious pecks right on the same wounded spot. Fatty's whole body went rigid. Even though I wasn't the one feeling it, I could almost sense the pain, like firecrackers exploding on his butt. His face turned purple, his whole body stiffened, tears streaming uncontrollably. A strangled wail escaped from behind the tape. I stood frozen, horrified. Poor Fatty, once again wounded by the same damned rooster, in the same exact place. Just then, Brother Liu returned with the medicine. He stopped dead at the doorway, eyes wide. "What the hell? Why is it even more swollen than before?" I could only give a bitter laugh. I guess I shouldn't have left the house today. Aunt Liu said every 3 years brings a calamity. Maybe this was Fatty's turn to suffer mine.
Chapter 22. The Peachwood Barrier. Poor Fatty couldn't speak or even move. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at us, his expression so pitiful that he resembled a pear blossom in the rain. Brother Liu frowned, clearly unimpressed. "It's just a little wound. Is all that crying really necessary? Stop fussing. Once I apply the anti-inflammatory, you'll be fine." I leaned closer and whispered, "Brother Liu, the rooster came back and pecked him 3 more times on the same wound." Brother Liu's eyes widened. He looked around the courtyard, but saw no rooster in sight. "Where? I don't see any rooster." "It ran away," I said quickly. "Forget it. Just focus on the medicine." He nodded and bent over again, carefully dabbing the ointment on Fatty's wound. All I could do was sigh helplessly. Fatty's eyes were filled with despair, his lips trembling silently. I took the stale steamed bun I'd found earlier and tossed it toward the yellow dog, but the animal merely sniffed it once, then lay down lazily, uninterested. Unexpectedly, that hateful rooster appeared out of nowhere. It strutted boldly into the yard, pecked up the bun, and ran off with it. The yellow dog might not have cared for the bun, but it couldn't stand being challenged on its own turf. It barked furiously and charged after the rooster. The rooster panicked, flapping wildly, and, finding no escape route, bolted straight toward Brother Liu. It shot between his legs just as the yellow dog barreled after it. The dog, easily weighing over 30 kilograms, crashed into Brother Liu's legs with a sickening thud. At that exact moment, Brother Liu was holding a pair of forceps dipped in antiseptic, about to apply them to Fatty's wound. The impact jolted his arm violently. The forceps plunged deep into Fatty's backside. The scene that followed was undescribable. Even I winced in pain. Fatty, who had already been pecked 3 times by the rooster, now took the final critical blow. His body convulsed once, his eyes rolled back, and he passed out cold on the spot. That day, for the first time in our village's history, an ambulance came rumbling down the dirt road, and the one being carried inside was none other than poor Fatty. By some strange twist of fate, I got to ride in the ambulance for the first time too, sitting beside Brother Lou as we escorted Fatty to the county hospital. After emergency treatment, Fatty was moved to a ward. When he finally woke, he looked pale and frail, but alive. I exhaled in relief. Looks like he wasn't the one fated to take my calamity, after all, I muttered. Understand, inside the same ward was another patient, Grandpa Wong, the old man who'd been thrown off the donkey cart earlier that morning. He lay motionless on the bed, his injuries severe, but his eyes were open, quietly watching. When our gazes met, he smiled. For some reason, that smile made my skin crawl. There was something off about it. Too calm, too knowing. And then I saw it. Above his head shimmered a faint red glow, thin as mist, swirling slowly like smoke. I didn't know why I could see it, but the moment I did, unease clawed at my chest. Meanwhile, back in the village, my parents and grandfather had almost lost their minds searching for me. They combed every corner, calling my name, until they heard word that I had been taken to the county hospital with Brother Lou. They rushed over in a panic, thinking something terrible had happened. At that same time, Aunt Lou, the village spiritual medium, who lived 30 li away, had also gone to my house. She'd calculated that today was the day of my calamity, and had come specifically to help dispel it. When she learned I'd gone to the hospital, she hurried there with my parents and grandfather in tow. The moment they saw I was safe, and that the one in the hospital bed was Fatty, they finally relaxed. My grandfather, though, was filled with guilt. "He's my fault," he muttered. "I only closed my eyes for a moment after a drink, and the boy slipped away." My father didn't blame him, but the instant he saw me, he grabbed me by the arm, ready to teach me a lesson. Fortunately, Aunt Lou stepped in and stopped him. "Have you forgotten what happened to Jang's fifth uncle and Ma's third wife?" she warned. At that, my father froze. He lowered his hand. After all, everyone who had ever beaten me before had met some sort of misfortune. Even my own father had learned to be cautious. Aunt Lou's eyes swept across the room, sharp and searching. When her gaze landed on Grandpa Wong, her face changed instantly. Her expression turned grave, almost fearful. "We have to leave," she whispered. My family didn't understand, but they obeyed her immediately, helping me out of the room. Only after we returned home did Aunt Lou explain. "That old man," she said in a low voice, "the one lying beside Fatty, he's already half dead. His body is covered in death aura. He won't live much longer." My eyes widened as I remembered the faint red light above him. That glow I saw was death energy, she confirmed. "You were destined for misfortune today. If you'd stayed in that room any longer, that aura might have clung to you. That's why I rushed you home." Back home, everything seemed calm. We sat down together for dinner with Aunt Lou. But just after nightfall, grim news spread through the village. Grandpa Wong had died in the hospital. No one knew the cause. They assumed it was old age or the fall from the cart. But Aunt Lou's face grew tense the moment she heard it. "Quickly," she told my father, "find a peachwood branch at least 10 years old, and slaughter a rooster no younger than 3. Use its blood to draw a line before the door." My father didn't dare hesitate. He did exactly as she instructed. Once he brought the peachwood, Aunt Lou peeled off its bark and painted strange, twisting symbols along its length with the rooster's blood. Then she placed it upright before the door. "This," she said, "is a peachwood barrier, a ward against ghosts. The rooster's blood carries pure yang energy. Together, they'll keep any wandering spirits out." That night, our house was protected by 2 layers of defense. Aunt Lou looked at me gravely. "Today is your birthday, your 12-year cycle rebirth. It's your 3rd life calamity. Of the 3 you must endure, this one is the deadliest. If you fail to pass it, you could die." She paused, eyes distant. "I believe that old man, Grandpa Wong, was the one who took your calamity upon himself. His death wasn't coincidence." It was true. The moment we'd returned home, he'd passed away. Even so, Aunt Lou remained cautious. I didn't think much of it. After a meal, exhaustion washed over me. I went to my room and fell asleep almost instantly. But I hadn't slept long when I felt it. A cold awareness, like someone else was in the room with me.
Chapter 23. He Has Come. After spending the whole day running around with Fatty, I was completely exhausted. Once I'd eaten, I went straight to bed and fell asleep almost instantly. No one expected that after I fell asleep, I simply wouldn't wake up again. And that was when the truly strange things began. My family didn't notice anything unusual at first, but Aunt Liu was uneasy. Her heart wouldn't settle. Today was the day of my destined calamity. There was no way it would pass so peacefully. Not trusting her instincts, she had taken extra precautions before going to bed. She hung several special bells at the front gate and outside my bedroom door. These weren't ordinary wind chimes. They wouldn't ring for the breeze. They only sounded when something unclean drew near. When ghosts or spirits approached, they would chime on their own as a warning. Even though there was already a peachwood barrier at the door and rooster's blood spread across the threshold, enough to keep ordinary ghosts from entering, the unease in Aunt Liu's heart never faded. So she layered one more line of defense and finally went back to her room. She tossed and turned, unable to sleep, but old age doesn't bargain with worry. Eventually, drowsiness pulled her under. Around midnight, she heard a voice echo faintly by her ear. "He's here. He's here." At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then the temperature in the room dropped sharply. A violent shiver ran through her. She woke up instantly. The moment she opened her eyes, she heard it, a scratching sound at the door. Outside the window, something clattered softly, as if a shape were hopping back and forth in the courtyard. And then, all at once, the bells hanging at the gate and outside our rooms began to ring, sharp, urgent notes of ding-dang, filling the night. Aunt Liu's whole body trembled. She pushed her door open without even stopping to put on her shoes. The sight that met her eyes froze her in place. The courtyard was suddenly full of yellow weasels and foxes. Several of them stood right outside my door, their claws raking at it over and over. Everything was in an uproar, and yet inside the house, I still didn't wake up. Something was very wrong. The voice that had called out to her a moment ago came from the protective spirit she worshipped, her resident immortal. Sensing danger, it had rushed to warn her. The bells at the gate and outside my room were all ringing at once, proof that something filthy, something powerful had arrived. The first thing Aunt Liu did was rush to the courtyard gate to check the peachwood barrier. One glance and her face changed. On the peachwood stake were 2 footprints, burned black and clearly visible. The talisman symbols drawn in rooster's blood had been scorched as if by fire, charred and ruined. That stake was carved from peachwood over 10 years old, imbued with power to ward off spirits. Ordinary ghosts wouldn't dare come anywhere near it. But whatever had come tonight had stepped directly on it. It feared neither peachwood nor pure yang blood. This is bad. Something really has happened. Her heart pounding, Aunt Liu spun around and ran toward my room. "Old Wu, wake up! Something's wrong!" She shouted again and again, but my grandfather and parents didn't stir, not a single response. There was no time to worry about them. She sprinted straight into my room. I was 9 years old by then, and already sleeping in my own room. The moment she entered, she saw my entire body flushed a deep red. My small face was bright as a ripe apple. She rushed to the bedside and laid her hand on my forehead. It was burning, like a coal straight from the fire. The instant she pulled her hand back, I suddenly coughed a few times. But the cough that came out was hoarse, old, like the raspy chest of a man in his 70s or 80s. The sound sent a chill straight through her. Her first thought was that something foul had possessed me. But that didn't make sense. My body housed a powerful guardian spirit, an immortal fox over 1,000 years into its cultivation. With such a being protecting me, how could any random ghost enter so easily? Still full of doubt, Aunt Liu pressed her palm against the Ling Tai acupoint at the back of my head. She murmured a brief apology to the spirit within me, then closed her eyes and began chanting an incantation. Her whole body trembled. After a long moment she withdrew her hand, and her face had gone ashen.
The guardian immortal inside me, once so mighty, now felt weak to the point of vanishing. Its presence was barely detectable. But there was another spiritual force inside me, strong, vigorous, full of life. There was no doubt something had attached itself to me. She remembered my earlier cough, that old, ragged voice. Her thoughts flew back to the hospital that morning, to Grandpa Wong. Could it be him? He had only just died. To the naked eye, he was nothing but a recently departed old man. So how could he possess such strength? Unafraid of peachwood, unafraid of rooster's blood, able to invade my body immediately without even waiting for the first 7 days of death to pass? Even the fiercest vengeful spirits usually needed to survive beyond the first 7 to become this powerful. Aunt Liu's mind spun. For the first time in many years, she didn't know what to do. She hurried to my grandfather's room and pounded on the door. No response. In her panic, she had no choice left. She summoned the immortal spirit within her. Her eyes suddenly turned a vivid, glowing green. Then she threw herself against the door with all her strength. Bang! The door burst open. A wave of icy air rushed out to meet her. On the bed where my grandfather lay, a thick red-black miasma floated above him, swirling slowly. Especially at the crown of his head, the deathly aura was so dense it almost looked solid. Only then did Aunt Liu understand why no one had woken up earlier. Why the chaos outside, the scratching at the door, the ringing of bells, the crowd of foxes and weasels, none of it had roused my family. That heavy death aura had smothered their senses. She had been in such a hurry that she hadn't noticed it before. She rushed to my grandfather's bedside and shook him hard. He slowly surfaced from the darkness. "What's going on?" Seeing Aunt Liu in his room in the middle of the night, he was shocked. "Get up," she said urgently. "Little Calamity is in trouble." At those words, he jerked upright. "What? How? He was fine this afternoon." "It's complicated. Just get up first. We need your son and daughter-in-law too." As soon as he stood, his first instinct was to reach for the knife beside his bed, the same blade he always kept close to calm his nerves. With it in hand, he feared nothing. "Don't take the knife," Aunt Liu snapped. "It's useless now. The child isn't dealing with the living. He's been possessed." Hearing that, my grandfather let go of the knife and ran straight to my room. One look at me and his face drained of color. My skin was bright red, heat pouring off me like I'd been boiled in water. "How can this be?" he stammered. "We put the peachwood barrier at the door, and the rooster's blood too. How did it get in?" "I don't know either," Aunt Liu replied grimly, "but I suspect the thing inside him is the ghost of that old Wong from the hospital." Chapter 24. The weasel spirits bow to the moon. The blood moon hangs high. My grandfather had no idea what kind of grudge existed between me and Old Man Wang. He didn't know the man had slapped me twice in daylight. Maybe it wasn't even about those slaps. Maybe, in his mind, my scream had startled the donkey, made it bolt, thrown him off the cart, and cost him his life. So, after dying unjustly, his spirit refused to disperse and came looking for me to settle the score. Either way, this was the most dangerous calamity I'd faced in my 9 years of life. After that, Grandfather rushed to wake my parents. But just like him earlier, they'd been drowned in the death aura clinging to Old Man Wang's spirit. They slept heavily, impossible to rouse. It took a long time before they finally staggered awake. Back at the hospital, Aunt Liu and I had already noticed the thick death energy swirling around Old Man Wang. Most likely, the same aura had begun affecting us even then. Now the whole family gathered around my bed, panic written on every face. All they could do was pin their hopes on Aunt Liu. But even she had never encountered something like this. What puzzled her most was, how could a man who had just died be this strong? Ordinary, newly dead spirits didn't have the power to possess the living right away. Yet this one had done exactly that, entering my body the moment he breathed his last, draining me with every passing minute. Seeing my condition worsening, everyone was beside themselves. "Sister Liu, we raised this child all this way. We can't just watch him die. You have to save him, no matter what," my grandfather said hoarsely, eyes red. "Little Calamity grew up under my eyes. Even if there's only one sliver of hope, I can't just stand here and do nothing," he choked.
Aunt Liu clenched her jaw, but fear clouded her face. I don't understand. Who exactly is this old Wang? Why is he so powerful right after dying? How can he possess little Calamity so easily? My father spoke up, confused. Old Wang? He never married. No wife, no children, nothing special about him at all. Why would he latch on to my boy? Aunt Liu suddenly stiffened. What did you say? He never married? That's right, my father said. Everyone in the village knows. He grew up dirt poor. So poor even rats wouldn't bother visiting. Then the famine hit, and his parents starved to death. He scraped by alone after that. Grandfather nodded. That's how it was. But what does that have to do with little Calamity? Aunt Liu didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to my grandfather, eyes serious. Old Wu, do you remember his full birth date and his real name? Grandpa Wang was about the same age as my grandfather. They had played together as children. Of course my grandfather knew. Without hesitation, he recited old Wang's Bazi and real name. Aunt Liu listened, her expression shifting from dark to darker. When I was young, I studied under a wandering Taoist for a while. I learned some basics of yin-yang astrology and fate calculation, though I've rarely used them. Today, I'll calculate once, just this once. She sat down, fingers moving as she worked through the numbers and stems and branches of his Bazi. When she finished, she inhaled sharply. Her face grew even heavier. Just as I feared, old Wang is not simple at all. My father's anxiety spiked. What is it? What did you see? Aunt Liu's voice dropped, solemn and low. He was born in a Yang year, Yang month, on a Yang day, in a Yang hour. 4 Yangs converging. This is an extremely rare fate, something that might appear only once in 1,000 years. It's called the fate of 4 Yangs. She went on. Not only that, his life pattern carries the iron fate of breaking wolf. In his life palace, 3 fierce stars converge. 7 killings, the destroyer, and the greedy wolf. Those born with this fate are destined for upheaval, rises and falls, extremes of fortune and misfortune. When alive, they may not seem special, but once they die, their obsessions become terrifyingly strong. Especially if they die unjustly, then their spirit turns more powerful than even most vengeful ghosts, 10 times more dangerous. Her gaze swept over my pale, flushed face. If someone is targeted by such a spirit, they will die within a day, no doubt about it. The room fell into stunned silence. After a moment, she continued. There is a way to soften a fate like his. As long as he marries, has a wife, has children, yin and yang would balance. His pure yang fate would be moderated. Then after death, his resentment wouldn't be so strong. But old Wang never married. His fate remained pure yang, unmixed and unrestrained. So, when he died unjustly, his resentment exploded, and he became an extraordinarily fierce, wandering soul. That's why he's latched on to little Calamity. Grandfather frowned. But why choose him? They were in the same ward as Fatty. Why not possess Fatty instead? Aunt Liu shook her head. I can't be sure Fatty's entirely in the clear. What I do know is this. Today is the day of little Calamity's 3rd life calamity. For him to be haunted by old Wang is no coincidence. The boy's fate is unusual too. I tried to calculate it once, but all I saw was fog. I couldn't see anything clearly. Maybe my cultivation isn't high enough. My father grew more distressed. You said anyone he clings to will die within a day. Does that mean my son has no chance at all? Aunt Liu sighed heavily. Maybe there is still a way, but my cultivation is shallow. Even the guardian spirit I serve can't do anything. Old Wang's fate is too strange. Pure yang, born to suppress all demons and ghosts. He doesn't just restrain my guardian spirit. Even the foxenmerle inside little Calamity is completely suppressed. Its spiritual power so weak it's almost gone. She looked at me, eyes full of sorrow. I'm afraid there really may be nothing we can do. She had said before that my 3rd calamity would be the greatest in my life, and if I failed to pass it, my little life would simply end here. Her words plunged the room into a suffocating gloom. My mother collapsed beside my bed, sobbing until she almost fainted. Grandfather and my father could only sigh helplessly, faces gray with despair. Aunt Liu couldn't bear the heavy air. She stepped outside, quietly lit a cigarette, and looked up at the sky, then froze. At some point, the moon above had turned blood red. High in the heavens, the North Star and the Big Dipper shimmered strangely, their light flickering in and out. But what chilled her most was what she saw atop our roof. The tiles were crowded with countless yellow weasels and foxes, all kneeling in neat rows. They bowed to the blood-red moon, performing the grand ceremony of 3 kneels, 9 prostrations. The weasel emels bow to the moon, and the blood moon hangs high. Aunt Liu had never in her life seen anything like this. The ancients had a saying, when strange things happen, demons are at work. When the heavens shift, disaster follows. She looked up at the sky, then at the weasels and foxes kneeling and bowing, and for a long moment she was stunned, speechless.
Inside the house, my condition worsened. I burned with fever all night, never cooling. I muttered nonsense in my sleep, my hoarse, elderly voice echoing again and again. No one in my family, not even Aunt Liu, dared close their eyes. Based on her calculations, I shouldn't have lasted past midnight. At dawn, my situation deteriorated further. Dark purple blotches, like the marks of a corpse, began appearing across my skin, spreading rapidly. My fever burned on. My breathing grew shallow. I looked less like a living child and more like a body waiting to be claimed. My mother fainted from crying more than once. My grandfather and father were helpless, only able to watch, sigh, and worry. During that time, Aunt Liu tried everything. She even summoned her guardian spirit to enter my body, hoping to drive out old Wang. But it failed. Worse, my condition deteriorated even further. The hours dragged by. The sun climbed toward noon. And then, just as all hope seemed spent, something unexpected happened. A fat monk appeared at our front gate. He was massive, round face, thick neck, his whole body looking like it weighed at least 200 jin. He seemed to be in his 50s, maybe even pushing 60. He knocked and called out, "Is there a 9-year-old child in this house, one plagued by evil spirits?" My grandfather took one look at him and thought he looked more like a con artist than a holy monk, but his first words hit our situation dead on. That alone made grandfather's heart jump. "Yes, yes," he stammered. "My grandson is in grave danger. Master, why have you come?" The monk nodded as if everything were expected. "Good. Then I've come to take that boy as my disciple. The problem on him, this poor monk can resolve. As long as you let him bow to me as his master, I will save him at once." Grandfather rushed inside, calling everyone out, and Aunt Liu. He told them there was a monk who said he could save me, but admitted he didn't quite trust the man. After all, a monk that fat hardly looked like someone who lived on fasting and meditation. Aunt Liu stepped out and stared at the monk, sensing he wasn't ordinary. She approached slowly and probed. "You come from the northern mountains, ride the horse beyond 3 bridges, and carry a spirit of your own? Tell me, Tao friend, which immortal do you serve?" She was saying she herself came from 30 Li village and was a spirit medium in the yellow immortal tradition. She wanted to know this monk's path, his lineage, his patron. The monk burst out laughing and waved a hand. "No need to test me. This poor monk comes from the southern lands. My Dharma name is Jia Ming. Now where is my disciple? Take me to him." He looked impatient and made to stride straight into the house. Aunt Liu quickly blocked his way with a smile, pulling out her tobacco pipe. "No hurry, master. Have a smoke first?" She stuffed shredded tobacco into the pipe and prepared to light it.
In truth, this was just a test. If this monk was a fraud, bringing him inside could make things even worse, might even cost my life. She dared not be careless. But just as she reached for the box of matches, the monk flicked his sleeve impatiently. Troublesome. Don't get in my way. I'm here to take a disciple, not smoke. In the blink of an eye, the unexpected happened. The tobacco in her pipe ignited on its own, smoke curling upward, even though the matchbox was still closed in her hand. Everyone stared, stunned. Even Aunt Liu froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. This wasn't sleight of hand. This was real magic. After a long moment, she turned to my grandfather and nodded. This monk is no ordinary man. Let him go inside and see Little Calamity. The monk squinted happily and was about to step inside when my father suddenly blocked his way. Master, why must you take my son as your disciple? If he becomes your disciple, will he have to shave his head and become a monk? What's wrong with becoming a monk? Jia Ming snorted. If this poor monk doesn't save him, he dies today. My father hesitated, torn. But he's my only son. If he becomes a monk, who will carry on the Wu family line? Grandfather couldn't take it anymore. He pushed my father aside. You still care about that now? First we save him. Everything else can wait. Master, please come inside. Wait. A calm voice sounded outside the courtyard. Everyone turned. An old man dressed in fine clothes was walking in, followed by 4 or 5 young men in suits. The moment Jia Ming saw him, his face darkened. Damn you, Shen Tu-Wei, he snapped. There's such a thing as first come, first served. I was here first. The boy is my disciple. No one is taking him from me. The old man, surnamed Shen, smiled and looked at my grandfather and father. I can save your son as well, he said mildly. If I treat him, he'll have to become my disciple. But if he follows me, he won't have to be a monk. He can still grow up, marry, have children, and your Wu family will have an heir. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider. At that, my entire family lit up. Someone who could cure me and didn't demand I become a monk? Of course they'd want to choose him. After all, they wanted me alive, but they also wanted me to marry, have children, and continue the family line. If I became a monk, the Wu family line would end with me. Jia Ming exploded. Shen Tu-Wei, you bastard! He shouted, leaping to his feet. You dare ruin my business? This isn't over! He lunged forward, ready to swing. The men behind Shen stepped in immediately, forming a human wall. Shen just smiled, eyes narrowed. Master Jia Ming, you're a man of the cloth. Is it really proper to always talk about beating and killing? Taking a disciple is their choice. People choose the master they find suitable. Why force them? He hadn't even finished speaking when the harsh blare of a car horn sounded outside the gate. Another group of people entered. Leading them was a tall, broad-shouldered, middle-aged man in gold-rimmed glasses. Behind him followed several attendants, and, strangely, a little girl of 7 or 8.
Chapter 26. The Feng Shui King, Li Xiantong. My whole family and Aunt Lu had been worn to the bone from worrying over me all night. My mother had cried until she was almost out of tears. None of us had any idea where these people had come from, yet one after another they appeared, all insisting they could save me. One even bringing his own daughter as part of the bargain. Naturally, if we had to choose, everyone's first instinct was the middle-aged man who'd brought his beautiful little girl with him. Who wouldn't want someone who could both save your child and gift you a future daughter-in-law? But the moment that man finished speaking, old Shen Tu-Wei blew up.
His beard trembled, his face flushed with rage, as he pointed a quivering finger at the middle-aged man. "Young Gawi," he shouted, "in all my years I've never seen anyone as shameless as you. Just to take a disciple, you'd even use your own daughter as a bait? Truly, what a wonderful father you are!" The fat monk, Master Jiaming, looked just as offended. He spat on the ground. "Shameless," he scoffed. "The heavens burn red, the blood moon hangs high, the Ziwi star shakes the sky, and at a time like this, taking this boy as a disciple would bring glory to my Yang family Feng Shui lineage for a generation. A once-in-a-thousand-years chance. How could I possibly let it fall into your hands?" Young Gawi folded his arms, smug. "And what's wrong with that?" he said. "Even if my daughter marries the boy, she's hardly marrying beneath herself. I've already calculated everything. It's just a pity for you, old monk. You've cut off your descendants. No daughters, no nothing. As for old Shen over there, his girl is probably old enough to be the boy's mother by now. Can't very well give her away, can he?" He threw back his head, thoroughly pleased with himself. Shen Tue snorted. "You just reminded me," he said slowly. "My daughter may be a bit older, but I have 2 granddaughters, still quite young. The boy can pick whichever he likes." The monk Jiaming rolled his eyes. "Shen Tue, weren't you just lecturing Yang here about selling his daughter, and now you're worse than he is? You're throwing in your granddaughters? Even I, a wandering monk, have to look down on you." While they were arguing heatedly, the sound of car horns blasted again outside the gate. Moments later, another group walked into our courtyard. This time, the one in front was a middle-aged woman in a chengsong, refined, elegant, easily in her 40s, yet still sharp and alluring. Behind her were several young women in their 20s, each one beautiful in their own way, all stunning. The woman walked in with lazy grace, a faint smile on her lips. "Enough, enough," she said. "Stop fighting. This child may be chosen by heaven, but his life is destined to be full of hardship. Taking him as a disciple won't be easy. You, rough old men, what do you know about raising a child? Why don't you let me take him instead? I'll treat him like my own son. As for a future wife, my female disciples are countless. I'll be taking in more over the years. Once he grows up, he can choose as he likes from among them. Isn't that better than whatever the rest of you can offer?" The moment she stepped forward, the other 3, Monk, Shen, and Yang, fell silent. For a brief moment, no one had anything to say. My father and grandfather exchanged a look. Then my father blurted out, "Oh, that would be wonderful, wonderful! Women are more attentive by nature. I'm sure you would take very good care of our little calamity." Grandfather nodded unconsciously. "Yes, yes, that does make sense." In no time at all, our humble house was overflowing with distinguished guests. The courtyard was packed shoulder to shoulder, so crowded that it seemed everyone had forgotten that I was still lying inside, unconscious and half dead. The whole family was already busy picking out my future wife. Beside them, Aunt Lou stood there dazed. Thinking back, she finally realized the scene of the blood moon, the trembling Ziwi star, the weasels and foxes kneeling and bowing on the roof last night. That heavenly anomaly had been deliberately created by the yellow weasels and fox spirits to send a signal, a beacon to call these masters here, to help save me. My fate was too unusual, and combined with their fox magic, it had been enough to stir the heavens and summon this strange gathering. Outside our house, the dirt road was crammed with cars, no fewer than 10 parked in a row. Our village was remote and poor. The roads were all packed earth. Even in 10 days or half a month, you might not see a single car. Yet now, over 10 had appeared, and all of them luxury models, mostly Mercedes. It was as if someone had transported a city street into our tiny village. Naturally, the whole village boiled over. Everyone rushed over, crowding around our gate, craning their necks to see what was going on. In truth, the people who'd entered our yard were only some of those who'd come. Many others had taken just one look at the courtyard and left. They too had come hoping to take a disciple. But seeing 4 heavyweight figures already standing inside, they instantly lost confidence. Knowing they couldn't compete, they slipped away quietly. The fat monk, Jiamin, who'd arrived first, finally lost his patience. "All of us here are people of the Jianghu," he said angrily. "We follow the rules of the Jianghu. I was the first to arrive, therefore, by the rule of first come, first serve, this disciple is mine." Shen Tue agreed.
He's right. We should follow the old ways. If we want to take a disciple, we must have the consent of the boy's family. Let them choose. Whoever they pick gets the disciple. No need to argue." "Agreed," said Yang Gaoyi. "Taking a disciple has to be done with the family's blessing." As he spoke, he pushed his daughter forward gently. "Brother Wu," he said to my father, beaming, "we may well become in-laws in the future. Look at my girl, pretty, fair-skinned. How about her as your daughter-in-law?" My father glanced at the little girl. To be fair, she was extremely pretty. Within 10 villages in any direction, you wouldn't find another child like her. She fluttered her big round eyes at him, smiled sweetly, and said, "Hello, uncle." Good child, my father muttered, flustered. Then he turned quickly to my grandfather for help. He clearly thought the offer was not bad at all, but the final decision had to come from the head of the family. Grandfather, however, looked just as stunned. He couldn't give an answer right away. The other stared at him expectantly, eyes shining, as if all that was left was for him to shout, "I choose you! I choose you!" Just as he hesitated, someone squeezed through the crowd at the gate. Compared to the 4 masters in the yard, this newcomer looked utterly unimpressive. He wore a tattered Taoist robe, his hair tied into a simple topknot, held in place by a wooden stick. On his feet was a pair of straw sandals worn almost to shreds. As he pushed through, people instinctively stepped aside, not out of respect, but because he reeked. It was impossible to tell how long it had been since he last bathed. "Stop fighting," the Taoist said loudly the moment he entered. "It's useless. This child, I am taking him as my disciple." The 4 masters in the courtyard turned as one. The instant they saw him, their eyes bulged and their faces changed color. The beautiful woman in the chengsong couldn't hold back a gasp. The Feng Shui King, Li Xiantong," she breathed.
Chapter 27. The Child Marked by Heaven. The moment the name Li Huantong was uttered, the courtyard seemed to fall into a heavy, breathless silence. Even the fat monk Jiaming, who just moments ago had been ranting and cursing, snapped his mouth shut. The arrogant Yang Gaoyi turned pale, and even the poised beauty Ma Yanling instinctively took a step back. Only then did my family realize. This disheveled Taoist, who looked as if he hadn't bathed in a month, was not some wandering vagrant. He was the Feng Shui King, a man whispered about in legends. They said Li Huantong had once changed the course of a river with a single divination, that his understanding of yin and yang could summon wind and storm. It was said that even government officials and wealthy magnates had waited months for an audience with him. And now he had appeared here, in our poor rural courtyard, for the sake of a half-dead boy. The other's arrogance vanished in an instant. Yang Gaoyi tried to mask his unease with a stiff smile. "So it is Master Li," he said, voice trembling slightly. "I thought you'd already transcended the mortal world. Who would have expected you to show up for something so trivial?" Li Huantong ignored him completely. He stepped forward, straw sandals scraping against the ground, his presence quiet yet overwhelming. His robe, though patched and threadbare, seemed to ripple faintly with some unseen energy. He stood beside my bed and glanced down at me. I was still burning with fever, my skin red as fire, my breath shallow, fading. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice deep and steady, as if each word carried the weight of mountains. "The child's yin and yang are reversed. Heaven's energy struggles against the mortal shell. A spirit of pure yang has possessed him, one that refuses to leave." Aunt Liu stepped forward cautiously. "Master Li," she said, "we suspected the ghost of Old Man Wong. He died unjustly and clung to the boy's fate. But his strength, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. I couldn't exorcise him." Li Huantong turned his head slightly, his gaze sharp as a blade beneath those half-lit eyes. "You did what you could," he said softly, "but you are bound by mortal limits. What has entered this child is not merely a restless ghost. It is a soul of the severed sun, born of pure yang, forged in grievance and death. At that, everyone froze. Even Aunt Liu, who had seen things no normal person could bear, looked terrified. Soul of the severed sun? My grandfather asked hoarsely. What is that? Li Huantong raised a hand. From within his sleeve a faint golden charm fluttered into his fingers. He gazed at the flickering talisman, then back at me. Once in 100 years, he said, a person is born under 4 blazing yang signs: year, month, day, and hour, all of pure fire. If such a man dies with hatred still in his heart, his soul cannot enter the cycle of rebirth. Instead, it becomes a severed sun spirit, neither ghost nor god. Its power exceeds that of demons. Its will cannot be bound by heaven or earth. He closed his eyes briefly. And this spirit has chosen your boy. The words hit my family like thunder. My mother fell to her knees, sobbing. My father's face turned ashen. Grandfather's hands shook uncontrollably. Master Li, he begged, please save my grandson. Whatever it takes, whatever you need, please. Li Huantong didn't answer immediately. He reached into his robe again and drew out a slender bronze compass, its needle spinning wildly as soon as he held it over me. For a moment, the air seemed to hum, and the faint scent of blood and incense filled the room. Then his expression darkened. Heaven's mark, he murmured. The child's fate has already been sealed. Aunt Liu trembled. What do you mean, sealed? Li Huantong turned to her, eyes calm but heavy. This child was not cursed. He was chosen. The word silenced everyone. Chosen? My father repeated, voice shaking. By whom? By heaven, Li Huantong said. The child's destiny crosses life and death. He was born to walk between both realms, a bridge of yin and yang. He paused, his voice dropping lower. But heaven's favor is cruel. Those who are marked by the stars must first endure calamities beyond measure. If he survives this one, he will rise beyond human bounds. If he fails... He glanced once more at me, and the flickering lamplight reflected in his eyes like molten gold. Then his soul will vanish forever. Not even the gods will find its trace. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother wept quietly. My grandfather sat down heavily on a stool, face pale as chalk. Finally, Li Huantong spoke again. I can save him, he said slowly. But once I intervene, fate will shift. The child's path will no longer be his own. He will belong to the Tao. Aunt Liu clenched her fists. Master Li, does that mean? Yes, he said simply. If he lives, he will become my disciple. And with that, he placed his hand over my forehead. The golden talisman flared in his palm, and for the first time that night, the fire burning in my body began to fade. Outside the house, the blood moon dimmed slightly, and the wind carried the faint echo of foxes crying in the hills.
Chapter 28. The Severed Sun Exorcism. The moment Master Li Xuantong's palm touched my forehead, a surge of force swept through the entire house. The flickering oil lamps trembled violently, and a strange golden glow pulsed beneath his fingers, as if a living current had awakened. Outside, the blood-red moon dimmed for an instant. The air grew thick, humming with unseen energy. Even the foxes and weasels that had been prowling on the rooftops fell silent. Inside the room, everyone could feel it. Something ancient, fierce, and unrestrained was beginning to stir. Aunt Liu quickly set down several talismans around my bed, forming a crude spirit suppression circle. Her voice quavered slightly as she chanted, "Pure light of heaven and earth, return the spirit to its origin. May yin yield to yang, and evil disperse." But Li Xuantong simply lifted a hand. The talismans she had placed down burst into faint golden flame and vanished into dust. "Your charms will not work here," he said calmly. "What dwells within this child is not a wandering ghost, it is a fragment of divine wrath." He withdrew from his sleeve an ancient bronze mirror, its back engraved with clouds and coiling dragons. Even after 100 years of tarnish, it seemed to breathe faint light from its surface. "The sun mirror of the 8 trigrams," Aunt Liu whispered in awe. "That's a sacred relic. I thought it was lost." Li Xuantong said nothing. He held the mirror above me, and the reflection that emerged was not my face. Instead, a shadow appeared, the vague outline of an old man's face, twisted with pain and fury. His eyes burned crimson like dying embers, and his lips curved in a grim, silent snarl. "Old man Wang," Li Xuantong murmured, "your soul refuses to depart." The reflection in the mirror contorted. A deep guttural growl filled the room. The temperature plummeted. Frost began to form along the window frames. My mother clutched my father's arm, trembling. The lantern flames shrank and turned blue. Then came the sound, a piercing, inhuman scream from within me. The entire bed shuddered violently. I, who was motionless all this time, suddenly arched my back, my body straining, veins bulging along my neck. My voice, but not my voice, howled from my throat. "You took my life, I will take yours." My mother shrieked and fell backward, Aunt Liu's face drained of color. Li Xuantong, however, remained unmoved. He raised the bronze mirror higher and shouted, "By the decree of heaven's Tao, I call upon the light of the sun. Purge this shadow. Return the lost soul to its path." At his words, the mirror blazed with pure golden fire. A column of light burst forth, striking my chest like a bolt of lightning. The scream that followed was not human. A dark shape erupted from my body, slamming against the ceiling before falling to the ground. It writhed and twisted, the same crimson-eyed old man from the mirror, his body transparent and wavering, half smoke, half spirit. "You meddle in heaven's justice, Li Xuantong," the spirit bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder inside the room. "This boy bears the mark of destiny. You cannot sever fate." "Fate belongs to those who survive it," Li Xuantong answered evenly. "And you are already dead." With a swift motion, he drew a small peachwood sword from his robe. Its surface glowed faintly, and the smell of pine and incense filled the air. He pointed it at the spirit. "Depart." The old man's wail tore through the air, so powerful that the windows cracked. The entire house shook as if a storm had hit it. Outside, dogs howled. The blood moon flared one last time, then vanished behind the clouds. The shadow lunged towards Li Xuantong, but the Taoist's figure didn't move. He flicked his sleeve, and a line of golden symbols shot forth, binding the spirit mid-air. "Your grievance was born of ignorance. You were not pushed from the cart by this boy's cry. Your own heart gave out before you fell. Heaven records truth. Fate has no debt with him." The spirit froze. His crimson eyes flickered with confusion. Li Xuantong pressed the peachwood sword to the mirror. "Go," he whispered. With one last echoing cry, the figure dissolved into mist, drawn back into the bronze mirror like water flowing upstream. And just like that, the house fell silent. My fever broke. The redness faded from my skin. My breathing steadied, and I slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. The oppressive chill that had blanketed the house lifted slowly, and the smell of incense replaced the scent of death. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Li Xuantong lowered the mirror and exhaled softly. "It's done," he said. "The spirit has departed, but the child's fate is not ordinary. His path has only begun." Aunt Liu bowed deeply. "Thank you, Master Li. If not for you—" "Do not thank me," he interrupted. "The heavens guided me here. But remember, when a child bears heaven's mark, saving him once may only delay the storm. Calamity will follow him still." He turned to my grandfather. "From now on," he said, "the boy must be taught the ways of balance. Keep him away from graves, blood, and death. The boundary between the living and the dead has thinned around him." Then, as silently as he had come, Li Xuantong tucked the mirror into his sleeve, stepped out into the courtyard, and disappeared into the night. Only the faint echo of his sandals remained, and above the distant mountains, the first pale light of dawn broke through the fading clouds.
Chapter 29. The Battle of Masters. At dawn, the storm that had shaken our little house finally seemed to quiet, but the tension that hung in the air was sharper than ever. Though the exorcism was over, Master Li Xuantong's arrival had ignited something far larger than my family could grasp. 4 powerful masters still stood in the courtyard: Monk Jiaming, Yang Gaoyi, Shen Tuwei, and the enchanting Mao Yuanling, each of them revered names in their own right, each unwilling to bow to another. Now with Li Xuantong's sudden appearance, the air seemed to thrum with invisible energy, as if the ground itself were watching to see what would happen next. The shabby Taoist raised his gaze, calm as still water. "So," he said slowly, 4 famed cultivators all gathered here for a single child." His tone carried neither arrogance nor mockery, just a faint weariness, like someone who had already seen through the vanity of the world. Yang Gaoyi snorted. "Huh, don't think we'll bow to you, Li Xuantong. You've been hiding in your mountains for 20 years. This isn't your world anymore." Li's eyes gleamed faintly beneath his messy hair. "And yet you're here," he said quietly. "All of you. If the world no longer concerns me, then why are you all standing in my way?" The words struck deep. For a long moment no one spoke. Even the foxes outside seemed to hold their breath. Mao Yuanling was the first to move. With a flick of her wrist, a faint perfume filled the air, sweet, intoxicating, like spring blossoms masking the scent of blood. "Master Li," she said softly, her smile sharp as a blade, "none of us deny your strength, but this child carries fate itself. Whoever guides him will inherit the will of heaven. You don't truly mean to claim that right for yourself, do you?" "I claim nothing," Li Xuantong said. "Fate chose him. I only mean to ensure that fate does not destroy him first." Her expression darkened. "And if that fate was meant to be mine?" Li's lips curved faintly. "Then heaven made a poor choice." Before anyone could blink, her sleeve rippled. Several crimson paper talismans shot from her hand, burning with pink flame as they streaked toward Li Xuantong like meteors. Gasps erupted around the courtyard. The talismans struck the ground and exploded into a whirl of blinding petals. The fragrance turned thick, suffocating, and from within the smoke emerged phantoms, beautiful, half-naked women with hollow eyes and blood-red smiles. "Illusion of the 1,000 blossoms," Aunt Lu said in shock. "She's using fox spirit magic." Li Xuantong's face remained unreadable. He flicked his sleeve. A gust of wind burst forth, scattering the petals like torn paper. In that instant, all the illusions shattered. Only Mao Yuanling's face remained, pale, trembling as a thread of blood trickled from her lips. "You still use charms born of fox blood. No wonder your soul wavers." Monk Jiaming stepped forward, his round belly shaking as he clasped his palms together. "Amitabha, Master Li, your Tao is harsh and unforgiving. Allow me to test whether your compassion is as great as your pride." Before Li could reply, the monk slammed his palms together. Golden light erupted around him, and an enormous Buddha seal formed in the air, spinning, radiant, descending with a thunderous roar. The ground cracked under the force. Even Li Xuantong's robe fluttered wildly in the storm of light. Then he lifted one hand, index and middle finger forming a sword seal. "Break." A single word. The Buddha seal shattered like glass. Golden fragments rained down, fading into dust. The monk staggered back several steps, his beads snapping apart and scattering across the dirt. "Still chasing light," Li murmured, "but you've forgotten its source." Yang Gaoyi, unwilling to be outdone, stepped forward next. From his sleeve, he drew a golden compass shaped like the tiger's head of the emblem of his family's secret feng shui art. "Li Xuantong, your fame was built on lies," he roared. "Let's see whose mastery of heaven's lines still stands supreme." He slammed the compass into the ground. At once, glowing lines of energy spread like veins across the soil, the diagram of a massive dragon-tiger array. The air rippled, wind howled, and even the house behind us creaked as if the earth itself were bending. But Li merely smiled. You copy the form, but not the soul. He traced a single symbol in mid-air with his fingertip. The entire formation collapsed inward, its own power rebounding like a wave. Yang Gaoyi screamed as he was thrown backward, landing hard against the gate with a grunt. The array faded. Silence returned. Finally, Shen Tuwei, who until now had remained silent, took a step forward. Enough, he said quietly. Li Xuantong, we can't all be wrong. That boy's destiny is extraordinary, but the greater the gift, the heavier the burden. Are you truly sure you can guide him? Li's gaze softened just slightly. No, he said, after a long pause, but I can make sure he lives long enough to find out. The words carried such quiet conviction that even Shen Tuwei bowed his head. The courtyard was utterly still. Only the rising sun broke through the clouds, casting light over the scattered talismans and footprints on the ground. Mao Yuanling wiped the blood from her lips. The monk retrieved his broken beads. Yang Gaoyi leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. No one spoke another word. They all understood. The battle had already been decided. Li Xuantong turned back toward my room. His voice, low and steady, carried through the doorway. From this day forth, the child's fate lies beneath my hand. Those who seek to touch him again must first face me. Then he pushed open the door and disappeared inside. The others stood motionless, watching his ragged figure vanish into the dim light, and for the first time in many years, the masters of the living world felt truly small.
Chapter 30. The Hidden Mark. That morning, after Master Li Xuantong subdued the other masters, the courtyard finally fell into a fragile calm. The first light of dawn spilled over the tiled roof, illuminating the cracked earth and the remnants of burnt talismans. Inside the house, I still lay unconscious, my breathing faint, my pulse fragile. But the fever had faded, and the strange red hue from my skin was slowly receding. Master Li Xuantong sat cross-legged beside my bed, a small copper censer burning faint wisps of sandalwood smoke before him. He had not spoken since the battle. The others, Monk Jiaming, Yang Gaoyi, Shen Tuwei, and Ma Yuanling, stood at the edge of the courtyard, humbled, their eyes avoiding his. Finally, Aunt Lu broke the silence. Master Li, the child is safe now, isn't he? Li Xuantong slowly opened his eyes. The golden light within them flickered once, fading to calm gray. Safe, he murmured, for now. But his fate is far from ordinary. He looked down at me, the faint smoke curling between us. This child bears heaven's seal, a mark not seen for centuries. Aunt Lu blinked, confused. A seal? You mean a divine mark? A celestial imprint, Li said quietly, hidden deep within his spirit, placed there before his birth. It binds him to both realms, life and death, yin and yang. He turned to my grandfather. Old Master Wu, your grandson's path will not be peaceful. From this day forward, his soul will attract the things that should never cross into this world. The room fell silent. My father clenched his fists. Then what should we do, Master Li? Should we send him away? Hide him somewhere no one can find? Li Xuantong shook his head slowly. You cannot hide from the sky. The heavens mark who they will. You can only guide him or lose him. He placed his palm gently over my chest. At once, a golden ripple of light spread outwards. For a moment, everyone saw it. A faint, crescent-shaped sigil glowing beneath my skin, like a small half-moon burned into flesh. Gasps filled the room.
Even the seasoned masters exchanged uneasy glances. "That symbol," Ma Yuanling whispered. "I've seen it once before, in the archives of Mount Lu. The mark of the half-moon, heaven's calling sign." "It cannot be," Shen Tui said sharply. "That mark belongs only to those chosen by the Heavenly Bureau, the bridge between spirits and mortals." Li Xuantong's tone turned grave. "Exactly. He was born to walk between the two, but such power carries a curse. Every 7 years his fate will turn, and the boundary between his soul and the underworld will blur." He turned to Aunt Lu. "You, woman of Tam Top Li village, have keen intuition. You must stay near him. Guard his spirit when the next cycle begins." Aunt Lu bowed deeply. "I will, Master Li. I swear it." Then Li rose to his feet. His gaze swept across the 4 masters who still lingered in the courtyard. "You came here for the boy, but none of you truly understand what he represents. This child is not a prize to be claimed. He is a burden heaven itself dares not carry." None of them dared answer. Only the wind stirred, rustling the burnt leaves at their feet. "Leave," he continued. "Return to your mountains, your temples, your cities. Forget what you've seen here tonight. For those who meddle with heaven's mark invite their own ruin." His voice carried a quiet finality, and one by one they obeyed. Ma Yuanling turned first, veil fluttering like mist. Shen Tui followed, head bowed. Monk Jiaming muttered a trembling Amitabha, and even the proud Yang Gaoyi, still limping from the backlash of his own array, slipped away without a word. Soon only Li Xuantong, Aunt Lu, and my family remained. Li's expression softened slightly as he faced my grandfather. "This child's name carries weight. Tio Cheap, little calamity. It is no coincidence. The heavens themselves have written that word in his fate." "Then will he suffer all his life?" my mother asked in a trembling voice. Li Xuantong did not answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the open window, where the first sunlight spilled through. "Suffering and greatness are often twins. Every calamity he endures will carve strength into his soul. One day he may become the key that bridges the 2 realms, but whether that key opens salvation or disaster, that depends on the choices he makes." Then, with a faint sigh, Li Xuantong reached into his sleeve and produced a small jade pendant, its surface smooth and milky white, etched with runes that glimmered faintly like frost. "Keep this close to him at all times," he said. "It will stabilize his yin-yang flow and shield him from wandering spirits." He handed the pendant to my grandfather, who accepted it with both trembling hands. "Master Li," he said, voice thick with gratitude, "our family will never forget this." Li Xuantong smiled slightly. "You will forget, for heaven will see to it. But the boy will remember when the time comes." And with that, he turned and walked out into the light. The rising sun washed his ragged robes in gold. For an instant, his shadow stretched long across the courtyard, half divine, half human, before fading completely beyond the gate. Inside the room, the golden mark on my chest dimmed, but did not vanish. It pulsed once, like the quiet heartbeat of something ancient and alive. No one noticed the faint whisper that echoed in the air, soft as breath, chilling as prophecy. Heaven's child awakens, and with him the storm returns.
Chapter 31. The Blood Oath of Fate. After the masters had left and the courtyard once again fell silent, the sky hung gray, weighed down by the faint rumble of thunder. Though dawn had broken hours ago, the air still smelled faintly of incense and blood.
Master Li Xuantong had vanished like mist at sunrise, leaving only his echo in my grandfather's mind, and the lingering warmth of the jade talisman he'd left behind. That day, my house felt unusually still. No chickens crowed. Even the wind seemed hesitant to pass our gate. By noon, Aunt Lou finished burning the last of her talismans. She exhaled softly, her hands trembling slightly. The aura is gone, for now. But she didn't sound relieved. Her eyes drifted toward me, sleeping soundly on the bed. My breathing was steady, my face calm, but in the silence she could faintly hear something else beneath it. A rhythm, a pulse that wasn't entirely human. When she touched my wrist to check, a cold current shot up her arm. For a moment, she saw it. A faint golden line beneath my skin, coiling like a serpent. And beneath that light, something darker, waiting. She drew her hand back immediately. Heaven's child, born under two shadows, one of light and one of blood. Later that afternoon, my grandfather sat in the courtyard with Yang Gaoyi, who had returned unexpectedly. The proud Feng Shui master looked humbled now, his right arm still bandaged from the backlash of his own array. "Master Wu," he said quietly, "I came to apologize. What we did last night was reckless, but I must warn you, that mark on your grandson's chest, I've seen it before." My grandfather's eyes widened. "Where?" "In the archives of the Dragon Tiger sect," Yang said. "They call it the Blood Oath of Fate. It appears only once in a century, when heaven's will collides with the will of man." "What does it mean?" Yang hesitated. "It means your grandson was not born by chance. His existence bends the balance between the mortal and spirit realms, and when that balance tilts too far..." He didn't finish, but my grandfather understood. That night, as the family slept, the faint glow on my chest flickered again. It pulsed in time with something distant, a whisper carried on the wind. I dreamed of a place I had never seen, a vast plain under a red sky, where the ground was covered in white bones. And in the distance stood a colossal figure, half man, half serpent, its eyes glowing like molten gold. It raised a hand, and a voice echoed in my skull, ancient, resonant, inhuman. "You were marked long before birth. When the seventh moon rises, the gate will open, and you, child of calamity, will choose which world survives." I tried to run, but the ground melted beneath my feet. The bones turned to ash. The figure dissolved into mist, and from that mist a shape emerged. Master Li Xuantong, his robes tattered, his eyes burning with calm fury. "Do not listen," he said. "The voice is old as the underworld itself. It speaks only half-truths." "Then tell me," I cried, "what am I?" Li's expression softened. He said, "A bridge between what is and what should never be." The red sky cracked open, and from the rift spilled thousands of golden threads. They wrapped around me, warm, suffocating, and when I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. Morning light seeped through the window. The jade pendant at my chest pulsed faintly, as if alive. Aunt Lou sat nearby, exhausted, but smiling faintly. "You're awake," she said. "Thank the heavens." I looked at her blankly. I had a dream," she said. "I know. You spoke in your sleep. Names I've never heard. Words no mortal tongue should utter." Her tone trembled, but she forced a smile. "Rest, child. Dreams are just dreams." But when she turned away, her eyes betrayed the truth. She knew that dream was no dream at all. Outside, the world seemed unchanged.
Yet, far beyond our little village, across mountains and rivers, a wind began to stir. A wind that smelled of old blood and incense. In temples and towers, bells began to ring without hands to move them. In forgotten tombs, candles flared to life, and somewhere in the depths of the mortal realm, a figure cloaked in black stepped out from a sea of mist. His face was hidden beneath a wide hat, but in his hand he held a scroll of human skin, etched with a single glowing sigil, the mark of the half-moon. So, the child of calamity has awakened, the stranger murmured. Heaven may claim him, but the underworld calls him mine. He turned toward the east, toward our little village, and began to walk. Each step left behind faint trails of ash. Back in my room, I stared at the faint crescent mark on my chest, still glowing through the thin fabric of my shirt. A strange calm washed over me. I didn't know why, but I could feel it. Something vast and unseen, watching. And though I was only a child, I somehow understood. This peace would not last long. The battle for my soul had already begun.
Chapter 32. The Whisper Beneath the Earth. The following morning, the air above our village felt heavier than usual, as if something vast and unseen had pressed down upon the rooftops, flattening the smoke that rose from our hearths. Aunt Lou was the first to notice it. She stood by the gate, her hands clasped behind her back, staring toward the distant line of hills that framed our village like sleeping beasts. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "The ground's breathing wrong today." Her words carried a chill. Even the dogs nearby whimpered and slunk under the eaves. Inside, my grandfather paced the room restlessly. Though Master Li Huantong had left days ago, his presence still lingered like an invisible ward. The smell of sandalwood, the faint vibration of the talisman he'd left behind. But that morning, when my grandfather took the jade pendant from the altar, it felt cold. Not the coolness of stone, but something deeper, like touching a memory of the dead. He frowned and placed it back, muttering a prayer. "Master Li said this would protect us. Then why does it feel like the protection's fading?" Aunt Lou entered, her expression grim. "Because the thing that cursed this child was not merely a spirit. It was bound to the land itself. And when the earth stirs, so does it." That evening, my fever returned. It wasn't like before. No crimson glow, no ghostly voice. Instead, there was a low rhythmic thrum beneath my bed, as if something deep underground was knocking faintly against the floorboards. Tock, tock, tock. Every few minutes it came again, steady as a heartbeat. And with each knock, a faint whisper filled my ears, too soft to understand, too heavy to forget. I turned in my sleep, clutching the jade pendant. The moment I did, the sound stopped. But from the pendant's surface, a thin crack appeared. Hairline, but unmistakable. At midnight, the sky over the village darkened unnaturally. The moon vanished behind a smear of black cloud. Aunt Lou rushed out, barefoot, her eyes wide. She lit 3 sticks of incense, then planted them in the soil of the courtyard. The smoke rose, and instantly curled downward, dragged into the ground as though inhaled by something below. "Heaven help us!" she gasped. "It's waking!" My grandfather and father ran out, startled. "What's waking?" "The earth spirit," she hissed. "Every village has one. Some guard the land, others feed on what's buried beneath it." She pointed toward the fields. Far off in the distance, faint glimmers of green fire were weaving through the rice paddies, bobbing and vanishing like lanterns held by invisible hands. "Those are soul lights," she said. "When they walk the fields, it means the dead have begun to move." At that exact moment, I woke screaming. My eyes flew open, and for an instant I saw through the walls.
saw shapes moving under the earth like shadows swimming through dark water. And in the heart of that darkness, something enormous turned its gaze toward me. Its eyes were not eyes, just two hollow pits of red light. A voice boomed inside my skull, low and echoing, as if spoken through stone. Blood remembers blood. The debt of the living will be paid in kind. Then the vision shattered. When my parents burst into the room, I was sitting upright, drenched in sweat, staring at the cracked jade pendant in my palm. Aunt Lou entered moments later, her face pale, her lips trembling. "It's begun," she whispered, "the third echo of the curse. The boy's blood has awakened what sleeps below." My grandfather steadied himself against the doorframe. "Can we stop it?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not stop, only delay." Then she turned to me and drew a circle of salt around the bed, murmuring an ancient charm. Her voice quavered, but the words were steady. "Spirit of earth, heed my plea. Guard the child and spare the seed. If fate decrees his path through flame, let not the soil remember his name." The incense outside hissed. The wind rose. For a brief, shining moment, the air in the room grew still again. But far beyond the village, in a cavern no living man had ever entered, the same red eyes opened once more, and a whisper rolled through the earth, so low that only the dead could hear it. "The mark has cracked. The bridge is forming." And somewhere between dream and waking, I heard Master Li Huantong's voice, faint but clear. "Child, do not fear the darkness, for sometimes it is the only place heaven dares not look."
The following day dawned under a strange stillness. The sky above the village was washed in gray, neither light nor dark, as though the sun had forgotten how to rise. Even the roosters were silent. Not a single bark came from the dogs that usually filled our mornings with noise. Aunt Liu stood by the well, her eyes sunken and ringed with shadow. She hadn't slept. None of us had. The cracked jade pendant lay on the table, wrapped in red cloth, its faint golden glow now dim and sickly. "It's losing power," she said quietly. "Whatever's beneath us is feeding. It's drawing from his mark." My grandfather, his face gray as ash, asked in a trembling voice, "Feeding on what?" Aunt Liu didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the threshold, pressed her palm to the floor, and whispered, "On memory and on blood." That evening she gathered us in the courtyard. She had brought from her home a box of talisman papers, a bronze mirror, and a small wooden effigy, a figurine carved crudely from peachwood, the kind used to bind wandering spirits. "This isn't an exorcism," she explained. "We're not driving anything away. We're tracing where it came from." She pricked her finger and let 3 drops of blood fall on the figurine's chest. Then she lit incense, placed the bronze mirror before the idol, and began to chant. At first there was nothing, only the low hum of her voice and the steady hiss of burning incense. Then the air shifted. A faint breeze stirred, though no wind was blowing outside. The reflection in the mirror began to blur, rippling like water. And suddenly the figurine trembled. A hairline crack formed across its face, then another, and with a brittle snap, it split apart. From the fissure seeped a thin wisp of black smoke, curling into the air like a living thing. The smoke hovered over the mirror, and in its depths faint images began to form. Roots, bones, a dark tunnel twisting downward beneath the earth. "A tomb," Aunt Liu breathed. "There's a tomb beneath this village." My grandfather's eyes widened. "Impossible! This land's been farmed for centuries." "Not a human tomb," she interrupted. "Something older, something that shouldn't have been buried here." The black smoke coiled tighter, shifting until it shaped itself into a shadow of a gate, massive, carved from stone, covered in sigils that pulsed faintly with red light. Beneath that gate lay something vast and serpentine, curled in endless sleep. "Do you see that?" she whispered. That's the root of the curse. It's been sleeping here since before our ancestors built the village, and now your grandson's mark has awakened it. That night, I dreamed again. Only this time, it didn't feel like a dream. I found myself standing in a vast cavern, lit by flickering crimson veins that pulsed through the walls like arteries. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of old earth and blood. In the center of the cavern stood a colossal tree. Its roots stretched out like serpents, its trunk hollowed and filled with dark water. When I looked closer, I realized the water wasn't water at all. It was blood, still warm, rippling softly as if something below was stirring. Then I saw them, faces trapped beneath the surface, their mouths moving silently, their eyes open and pleading. One of them was Fatty Hu, his skin pale, his expression frozen mid-cry. I tried to reach for him, but the blood rose higher, swallowing his face whole. From deep within the tree, a voice murmured, low, ancient, resonant. Roots remember, what's buried beneath must rise again. The ground trembled, the blood began to boil, and from the hollow of the tree, something crawled out, a skeletal hand, slick with dark sap. I woke up gasping. Aunt Liu was at my side, clutching a string of wooden beads, chanting prayers under her breath. My body was drenched in sweat, but my hands were cold as stone. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The tree beneath the village." I nodded weakly. "It called my name." Aunt Liu closed her eyes, her expression darkening. "That's not a tree," she said. "It's a yin root, a gateway planted over a buried god. When the villagers built their homes here, they sealed it beneath the soil without knowing, and now your bloodline's destiny has split the seal wide open." My grandfather came rushing in. "What's happening to my grandson?" Aunt Liu turned toward him, her voice heavy with dread. "Master Li Xuantong warned us this boy was born to bridge realms. But now the bridge isn't just between heaven and the underworld, it's between the living world and what sleeps beneath it. Can it be stopped?" "No," she said softly. "Not stopped, only postponed." She looked at me, her gaze full of sorrow. "There's only one way to suppress the yin root. We must find its heart and burn it before the blood moon returns." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The air grew dense, and the faint sound of whispering roots rose from the fields once more. That night, no one in the village slept, because every few minutes, the earth itself seemed to breathe.
Chapter 34. 10 Years of Silence.
The first year I spent under Master Li Xuantong's roof passed more swiftly than I could grasp. At 9 years old, the world still felt enormous and full of mysteries. But by the time I turned 10, the boundaries of my world had shrunk to the courtyard, the school, and my master's study. A triangle that seemed both prison and sanctuary. Each morning I attended school like any other child, pretending to be ordinary. But every night, after the last light faded from the city, I sat cross-legged in front of a copper lamp, listening to my master's calm yet piercing voice as he guided me through scrolls written in ink so old it smelled faintly of earth and time. "Heaven and earth have their veins," he said, "the same as the human body. What you must learn is not how to control them, but how to listen." At first, I didn't understand, but slowly the city around me began to change. I could sense when the wind would shift. I knew when a sparrow would land before it even appeared. And sometimes, when the night was silent, I could hear the faint hum of the ground, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the soil. Years passed like falling leaves. My childish face hardened, my voice deepened. Master Li taught me everything. The patterns of the stars, the secret geometry of rivers, the speech of stones and wood. He was harsh, but never cruel, distant, yet deeply watchful. Still, he never spoke of my past, of the curse, the village, or the blood moon. It was as though those years had been sealed behind a wall of silence. One night, when I was 16, I dared to ask him, "Master, why did you choose me?" He looked at me for a long time, his gaze like the still water of a deep well. "Because you were chosen long before I found you. You are not my destiny, boy. You are heaven's answer to something that went wrong." That night I dreamt again. The same red moon hung over an endless plain. Beneath it stood the black tree I had seen as a child, its roots now thicker, its trunk pulsing with faint light. From within its hollow came a whisper, the same low, mournful voice. "The seal weakens. When 10 winters have passed, the bridge shall open." I woke to find the jade pendant glowing faintly once more. A thin crack had spread across its surface, the same one that had appeared years before, only now it was branching, like veins of lightning frozen in stone. By the 9th year of my training, I had become a different person. My senses sharpened, my spirit steadied, and my hands could trace the movement of the 5 elements as easily as one reads a book. Yet Master Li had grown weaker. His hair turned white, his voice quieter, his gaze always fixed on something far away, as though counting days. One evening, as we sat beneath the plum blossoms, he handed me a scroll bound in black silk. "Uo Kiep," he said softly, "your apprenticeship ends soon. You must return to where it all began." "Kusong village?" He nodded. "There lies what you must face, and what I could never destroy." The next day, he began teaching me something he called the sealing of the 9 gates. It was not a spell, nor a formation, but a ritual that bound spirit, time, and fate into one. He taught me for 9 nights. On the 10th night, as dawn began to glow over the horizon, he said quietly, "If I am gone by the time you awaken, burn this scroll, and remember, some doors are meant to stay closed." That night I dreamt once more of the crimson moon, but this time the tree was gone. In its place stood a vast chasm, and within it a single set of stone steps, descending endlessly into the dark. And from the depths came a sound, the faint echoing voice of Aunt Lou crying out my name. "Kiep, don't open it! Whatever you do, don't open it!" I woke in terror, and for a moment I thought it was just another nightmare. But when I went to Master Li's room, the door was ajar. Inside, the incense had long since burned to ash. The bed was empty, and on the table lay the black scroll with a single line written across it in his hand. "The 10th winter has come." Outside, snow began to fall, the first snow of the season. The world was quiet. The seal beneath the earth, the whisper in my dreams, and the fate I had tried to forget, all of it was waiting. And somewhere beyond the falling snow, in the direction of Kursong village, a faint crimson light rose once more beneath the moon.
Chapter 35. The Return to Kusan Village. The road home felt longer than the 10 years I had been away. The mountains seemed steeper, the forests quieter, and the air itself carried a heaviness I couldn't name. I'd thought I'd left the past behind, but every step towards Kusan Village felt like a step back into a shadow that had only been waiting. At the foot of the hill stood the same old milestone, its carved words half faded by rain and time. Kusan, 3 miles. The sight of it made something deep in my chest tighten. I touched the jade pendant hanging under my shirt, the one Master Li Shantong had repaired before he vanished. Though it gleamed faintly, the crack still ran through its center, like a wound that had never truly healed. When I reached the village, dusk had already fallen. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The narrow paths, the crooked fences, and the moss-covered well where I used to play with Fatty Hoo. But the air, it was wrong. There was no laughter of children, no barking dogs, no smoke curling from kitchen chimneys. The entire village was silent, as if the world had simply forgotten to breathe. I called out once. No one answered. Even the crows avoided the rooftops. I went first to my family's old house. The gate creaked open with a sound that echoed too loud in the emptiness.
Inside, everything was coated in dust. The chairs were overturned, and on the altar, the old family tablets lay shattered. But the strangest thing was the floor. It was covered in faint circular rune marks, drawn in black ash, the kind used in sealing rituals. My heart pounded. Someone had tried to hold something in, or perhaps to keep something out. That night I stayed in my old room. The bed still smelled faintly of sandalwood and dried herbs, the same scent Aunt Liu used to bring with her. I lit a small candle and opened the black silk scroll Master Li had left me. The words inside were drawn in silver ink, glimmering faintly under the flame. When heaven's gate closes, the earth's root opens. Between them walks the one born of both, he who must seal what the gods cannot see. I read the lines over and over, feeling the weight of them press down like chains. Outside, the wind began to rise. The candle flickered, and for an instant I thought I heard whispering, faint childlike laughter coming from the courtyard. I stood, every hair on my body prickling. When I stepped outside, the night was blacker than pitch, and there, beneath the old plum tree, stood a figure. It was small, thin, motionless. At first I thought it was a child, until it turned its face toward me. There were no eyes, just two hollow sockets, glowing faintly red from within. "You came back," it whispered. "The seal called you." The voice was not human. It was layered, as though a dozen mouths were speaking at once. I stepped back, drawing the talisman from my sleeve. "Who are you?" It tilted its head. "Once I was part of you." And then it smiled. "Now I am what waits below." Before I could react, the wind screamed. The plum tree bent sharply, and a shower of petals turned black as they fell. When I blinked, the figure was gone. Only a faint trail of ash remained where it had stood. By morning, the sky had turned the color of old steel. The villagers had begun to appear one by one, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes clouded as if they hadn't slept in weeks. When they saw me, they froze. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, an old woman's trembling voice cried out, "It's him, the boy from the curse." The others backed away. Someone dropped a basket. Another whispered a prayer. Before I could speak, a familiar figure pushed through them. Aunt Liu, her hair now completely white, her back bent, but her eyes still fierce. "Enough," she snapped. "If not for him, none of you would still be breathing." She turned to me, her lips quivering. "Kiep, child, you shouldn't have returned." I said, "Master Li sent me. He told me the seal was weakening." Her face went pale. "Then it's true." She led me to her house at the edge of the forest. Inside, candles burned before a wall of talismans and charms, dozens of them, each one drawn in blood and ash, their power barely holding. "For 10 years," she said, "I've been keeping it asleep. Every winter it stirs beneath the fields, and every spring the blood moon pulls it closer to waking." "What is it, Aunt Liu?" She hesitated. "The villagers call it the nameless root, but Master Li once told me its true name, Tian-yin, the hidden heaven." The words chilled me. I'd heard them before, in my dreams, in the murmurs beneath the ground. "If it wakes," she continued, "it won't just swallow this village. It will unmake the balance between worlds. The underworld will bleed into the living realm." She looked at me then, her eyes glistening with something between hope and fear. "And only the blood of the marked one, only your blood, can seal it again." That night, I sat alone beneath the old plum tree, the cracked jade pendant resting in my palm. Its glow had dimmed to a soft pulse, beating in rhythm with my heart. Somewhere deep in the earth I could feel it, a slow, distant stirring, like something vast shifting in its sleep. And as the wind whispered through the branches, a single red petal drifted down, landing silently on my open hand. It wasn't a petal. It was a drop of blood.
Chapter 36. The Red Moon Awakens. The night that followed was unlike any I had ever known. The air felt thick, dense with something ancient and unseen. Every sound in the village had died away. Even the insects seemed to sense that something sacred and terrible was drawing near. I sat in Aunt Liu's courtyard, staring up at the sky. At first, it was merely dark. Then, slowly, as the moon climbed above the eastern ridge, its light began to change. Pale silver deepened to rose, and rose to crimson. Within an hour, the moon had turned completely red. A blood moon, vast and swollen, hanging so low it seemed to scrape the mountain peaks. Aunt Liu appeared beside me, her face ghostly in the red light. In her hands, she held a wooden box wrapped in yellow silk. "It's time," she said softly. "Your master knew this night would come." She untied the silk and opened the box. Inside lay 9 talismans, each painted with black cinnabar ink. Their edges burned as if scorched by lightning. "These are the 9 seals of Heaven's Gate," she whispered. "Your master created them before he vanished. With these, you can close the passage that feeds the nameless root." I stared at the talismans, feeling their faint vibration pulse through the air. They weren't just paper. They were alive, humming softly like a heartbeat. We set out toward the fields. The moon's crimson light spilled over the village like a bleeding wound. Every house we passed was silent, but behind the doors we heard muffled weeping. The villagers knew. They always knew this night would come. When we reached the old burial hill beyond the paddies, the earth itself was trembling. The grass swayed, though there was no wind, and cracks were beginning to split across the slope, each one glowing faintly red from within. Aunt Liu knelt and pressed her palm to the soil. "It's beneath us," she said, "and it's hungry." I planted the first talisman at the hill's crest. It sank easily into the ground, too easily. The soil was soft, almost warm, as if pulsing with breath. The moment the seal touched the earth, a deep groan rumbled through the hill, like something vast, shifting in its sleep. Tock, tock, tock. The same sound I had heard beneath my bed all those years ago. Aunt Liu looked up sharply. "Hurry, we must place the others before it wakes." We ran along the slope, hammering the seals into the soil, one at each point of the old formation. With every seal I placed, the ground shook harder, and a chorus of whispers rose from below, 1,000 voices murmuring in a tongue that had no place in this world. By the 7th seal, my hands were shaking, my vision blurred, my breath came ragged. The marks on my chest, the old scars of the curse, were glowing faintly through my shirt. As each beat of my heart sent a jolt of heat through them, as if something inside me was trying to escape. When I reached the 8th seal, Aunt Liu grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "Stop," she gasped. "It's not the same. This seal, it's reversed." I looked down. The talisman in my hand was darker than the others. Its sigils were written backwards, and in the center, instead of the character for heaven, there was a single word: return. Before I could move, the talisman burst into flame. The ground beneath us split open, and a column of red light shot up into the sky. From the chasm came a wind so cold it burned. The soil tore apart, and from the darkness below rose a sound, a low, endless hum that felt alive. Then I saw it. Through the rising smoke and dust, a colossal shape began to emerge from the earth. At first, it looked like a tree. Then I realized it wasn't wood at all, but bone, a skeleton the size of a temple, its ribs curved like branches, its skull crowned with jagged horns. Beneath it, the earth glowed like molten fire, and from its hollow chest came a faint pulsing light, the heart of the nameless root. It was awake. "Seal it, Kiep," Aunt Liu screamed over the roaring wind. "Use your blood, now!" I tore the jade pendant from my neck and pressed it to my palm. The edge cut deep, and blood spilled down my wrist. I smeared it across the last talisman, feeling it burn like hot iron against my skin. Then I flung it into the heart of the chasm. The seal struck the glowing light, and the world erupted. A blinding wave of red energy shot outward, hurling both of us to the ground. The sky split open with thunder. The blood moon above shattered into shards of crimson fire. When I looked up, Aunt Liu was lying motionless beside me. Her beads had scattered across the ground, each one still glowing faintly as her lips moved in a final whisper. "You did it, child." "Aunt Liu!" I crawled toward her, but before I could reach her hand, her body dissolved into ash, swept away by the wind. The red light slowly faded.
The cracks in the earth sealed one by one, and silence returned to the valley. In the distance, dawn began to break, casting pale gold light over the ruins of the hill. I knelt there, bleeding and shaking, the jade pendant shattered in my hand. For a long time, I thought the nightmare was over. But, as the first ray of sunlight touched the ground, I felt it again. That same faint thrum beneath the soil. Slow, patient, as though something vast below was still breathing.
Chapter 37. The Breath Beneath the Ashes. The morning after the blood moon shattered, Kusan village awoke under a veil of smoke. A crimson mist hung low over the fields, and though the sky was pale, the air still carried the scent of burnt iron, like the world itself had been cauterized. I stumbled through the ruins of the burial hill. The ground was black and glassy in places, still warm to the touch. The old trees had turned to charcoal silhouettes, and where Aunt Liu had stood, there was nothing. Not even ash. Only her wooden prayer beads lay half buried in the soot, each one cracked, their faint light fading with every breath I took. I picked them up, feeling the last traces of her energy hum faintly through the cord. Her voice lingered like a whisper inside my mind. Even ashes remember what they once protected. That night, the villagers gathered around the central well. Many were too afraid to speak, their faces pale and hollow in the gray dawn. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear, as if I were something sacred and cursed. An old man finally broke the silence. The moon broke, yet the earth still trembles. Tell us, boy, is it truly over? I looked towards the horizon. The sun was rising weakly, but beneath its light, the shadows of the mountains seemed to move. No, I said quietly. It's not over. The seal held, but something underneath is still awake. A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Then what do we do?" I turned my gaze towards the forest that bordered the northern edge of the village, the place where the old temple of Heaven's Gate once stood, or rather where it had sunk. We find its heart, and we bury it again. By afternoon I stood at the temple ruins. Only the twin pillars remained, each carved with ancient sigils of dragons and clouds. Between them gaped a crater, a deep fissure that descended into blackness. The air above it pulsed like a living thing, thick with the same energy that had haunted my dreams for years. I knelt and pressed my palm to the ground. It was faint, but I could feel it. A pulse, slow and deep, like the heart of the world itself, still beating in defiance. As I listened, a memory stirred, Master Li Huangtong's voice calm and steady. If the seal breaks, the bridge will not collapse immediately. It will linger, half open, neither life nor death, waiting for the one born under two skies to finish what heaven could not. I lit 3 sticks of incense before the crater. The smoke curled downward instead of up, pulled gently into the darkness below. It was the same omen Aunt Liu had seen years ago. So it was never truly sealed, I murmured. From the shadows beneath the pit, a faint sound echoed. A child's laugh. Soft, playful, cruel. I froze. The laugh came again, closer this time, and with it, a whisper that chilled my bones. You gave blood to seal it, little one, but blood never truly leaves the soil. I rose slowly, drawing a talisman from my sleeve. The edges flickered blue under the dim light. Show yourself. The air shimmered, and out of the shadow stepped a shape. Small at first, then taller, until it stood at eye level with me. It wore my face. Its eyes were black pits. It smiled too wide, its movements fluid like smoke. It said softly, I am what waits below. You are not real. Neither are you. At least, not completely. It lifted its hand, and the ground trembled in response. The talisman in my palm burst into flame. The vision broke when I stumbled back, gasping for air. The figure had vanished, but the echo of its laughter lingered, woven into the wind that whispered through the ruins. I sank to my knees, my pulse racing. The pendant on my chest, though shattered though it was, began to glow faintly once more. And in that glow, I saw a flicker of something familiar. A strand of Aunt Liu's prayer bead cord, woven into the cracks of the jade. Her voice came faintly, as if from far away. You cannot fight it as you are. Seek the mountain that stands between the clouds and the sea. There, heaven's echo still lingers. That night, I packed what little remained. The broken pendant, the burnt scrolls of the 9 seals, and the cracked beads of Aunt Liu. Before I left, I turned once more towards the hill where she had vanished. The ground was quiet now. But beneath that stillness, I could hear it again. The faint, steady breath of something vast and ancient, waiting beneath the ashes. If it must end, I whispered to the night, then it will end with me. And as the first stars rose, I began my journey east, towards the mountain between the clouds and the sea, unaware that something else had begun walking beneath the ground, following my every step.
Chapter 38. The Mountain Between Clouds and Sea. 3 days after leaving Kusan, I reached the mountain Master Li Xuantong had once mentioned, a jagged silhouette rising from the mist, its peak lost in drifting clouds. The villagers called it Taiwan Son, the mountain of endless mist. It was said no one who climbed it ever returned. The forest at its base was silent. No birds, no insects. Only the steady sound of my footsteps against the wet earth and the distant crash of unseen waves, though the ocean was still hundreds of li away. By the time dusk fell, I found an ancient stone path half buried under moss. Its steps wound upward like a serpent, each carved with faded inscriptions. As I traced them with my fingers, I realized the words weren't prayers, they were warnings. He who ascends without fate shall not return. The cloud guards the gate of heaven's echo. I tightened my grip on Aunt Lou's cracked prayer beads and began to climb. The higher I went, the colder it grew. Mist coiled around me like living breath, swallowing sound, distorting shape. Sometimes when I turned my head, I thought I saw movement, a shadow just beyond the edge of sight, a figure watching, always a few steps behind. By the 3rd hour, I reached a plateau. At its center stood a stone archway, its pillars carved with dragons chasing pearls through clouds, but the carvings were wrong. The dragons had no eyes. Their sockets were hollow, empty, and between them, a single bronze bell hung from a chain blackened with age. I approached, my heart pounding. When I looked closer, I saw something carved along the bell's rim. To awaken the echo, offer the breath of 2 worlds. Before I could think, the pendant at my chest pulsed once, a faint glow seeping from the cracks. The air grew still, and then the bell began to ring on its own. Gong. The sound rolled through the mountain like thunder. The mist shuddered, and for a brief instant, the world itself seemed to fold. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer standing on the mountain. I stood before a vast sea of clouds, stretching endlessly in every direction. Beneath them, faint flashes of light flickered. Cities, rivers, stars. Above me loomed a temple of pure white stone, its doors sealed with chains of gold. And there, waiting at the base of the stairs, was Master Li Xuantong. He looked unchanged, still tall, calm, and ageless. Only his eyes had changed. They were dimmer now, like lanterns burning the last of their oil. "You came," he said softly. "Master, are you alive?" He smiled faintly. "Alive? Dead? The line has blurred for me. I linger only because you still remember my name." I took a step forward. The seal broke. Aunt Lou is gone. The root is still breathing beneath the earth. Tell me, how do I stop it? He turned toward the chained temple. "You cannot stop it. You can only replace it." Replace it? The nameless root was not born of evil. It was heaven's failed creation, a vessel meant to balance what the gods themselves could not. But when heaven abandoned it, the root turned its hunger toward the living world. He paused, then met my eyes. "You were born with the same mark because you are its reflection. 2 sides of the same design, one above the earth, one below. And when one sleeps, the other must wake." I felt my chest tighten. Then the seal didn't hold because I'm still alive? He nodded slowly. The bridge cannot be destroyed while both sides exist. Only by merging can the circle close. "You mean—" "Yes." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with sorrow. "To seal the root forever, you must descend and take its place. Become the guardian of the undersoil, heaven's living lock." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air trembled with the distant sound of waves.
the echo of two worlds colliding. Finally, I asked quietly, "And if I refuse?" Master Lu's gaze softened. "Then the bridge will open, and both heaven and earth will drown in shadow." He lifted his hand. A sphere of light appeared between his palms, golden and soft, like sunlight filtered through water. He said, "This is the final seal, formed from your bloodline and mine. Take it. When you reach the heart of the root, release it, and it will bind both of us, above and below." I reached out to take it, but the light was so warm, so heavy, that it made my fingers tremble. "Will I still be me?" I asked. His smile fainted. "You'll be more. You'll be what you were always meant to be." He placed the light in my hand, the warmth spread through me, and for a moment I felt everything, the mountain, the sea, the pulse of the earth below. Then the mist began to collapse. The vision of Master Li flickered, fading like smoke in the wind. He whispered, "Go, before the root breathes again." I gasped and found myself back on the mountainside, kneeling before the bell. The mist had thinned, and in the distance the first streak of dawn touched the horizon. In my palm, the sphere of light still glowed faintly, a living heartbeat, pulsing with warmth. And beneath the mountain, faint but clear, the world exhaled once. A long, shuddering breath.
Chapter 39. The Descent into the Root. By the time I descended from Taiwan San, the world below was already changing. The forests that once whispered softly now stood motionless, their leaves coated in a fine layer of ash. Rivers had turned sluggish and black, their surfaces rippling as if disturbed by something unseen beneath. The villagers I passed on the road did not speak. They only watched, their faces gray, their eyes glazed, like marionettes that had forgotten who held their strings. Each one bowed slightly as I walked by, murmuring the same phrase under their breath. "The bridge returns." The words followed me like a curse. When I reached Kusan once more, the village was empty. Every door stood open, every altar burned with dying incense, and from the well at the center of the square, a faint red mist rose, spiraling lazily into the night air. I knew what it meant. The seal's final heartbeat. The nameless root was stirring again. I clutched the glowing sphere Master Li Xuantong had given me. Its warmth was fading, like a sun drowning beneath the horizon. I had one night left. I went first to Aunt Liu's house. It had collapsed during the quake, but amid the rubble I found her old brass mirror, still intact, its surface clouded by soot. When I wiped it clean, I saw my reflection, but it wasn't mine. The figure staring back had hollow eyes and a faint blood-colored mark running down its neck. It smiled faintly, and though its lips didn't move, I heard its voice clearly in my mind. "You've come far, little shadow. But even gods tire of holding back what was born to devour." I turned away. The voice lingered, low and amused. "Descend, then. We've been waiting." At midnight, I stood once more upon the burial hill. The same hill where Aunt Lou had vanished, where the red moon had cracked the world. The ground beneath my feet pulsed with a deep, steady rhythm. Each beat echoed inside my chest like a second heart. The fissures that had once sealed themselves were open again, thin red light leaking from below. When I looked closer, I saw faint shapes moving in the glow. Faces, limbs, fragments of the dead. The root was no longer dreaming, it was calling. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The earth gave way beneath me. The fall felt endless. Down and down I went, through layers of stone, clay, and bone, the air growing thicker, heavier, filled with whispers that weren't quite words. Finally, I landed on something soft. Not soil,
not stone, but flesh. I stood on the inner walls of the root itself. The ground was warm, pulsing beneath my boots. Veins of red light ran in every direction, illuminating vast tunnels that twisted like arteries. The air vibrated with low, rhythmic sound, the breath of something ancient, patient, alive. And in the distance, I could see it, a faint golden glow, like the heart of the world beating deep below. I began to walk. As I moved deeper, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They spoke in many voices, men, women, children, even beasts, all merging into one. Blood of heaven, flesh of earth, why do you resist your own becoming? The walls shuddered as I passed, and faces emerged from the surface. Hundreds of them, their eyes wide, their mouths open in silent screams. I pressed onward, clutching the light to my chest. Its warmth steadied me, though with each step it dimmed a little more. At last I reached the chamber. It was vast beyond measure, a cavern of living flesh wrapped around a single glowing sphere, the size of a temple, the heart of the nameless root. It pulsed slowly, each beat releasing a wave of heat that rippled through the chamber walls. I could feel it, the same energy that had lived inside me since birth. It recognized me. "So," the voice said, echoing from every direction, "the lost piece returns." A shape rose from the base of the heart. It was neither man nor beast, but a form of twisting roots and bone, wearing the faint outline of my own body. Two hollow red lights burned where its eyes should be. It smiled faintly, and though its lips didn't move, it was something might be sadness. The lost piece returns. I held up the golden sphere. It trembled in my hands, as if resisting the moment it was made for. I thought of Aunt Liu's laughter, my grandfather's prayers, Master Li Xuantong's calm voice in the mist. "If this is the bridge," I said softly, "then let it carry no more pain." I plunged the light into the heart. A sound like thunder exploded through the cavern. The creature screamed, not in rage, but in release. The walls pulsed violently. The ground cracked open, and streams of light burst upward through the tunnels, racing toward the surface. I felt my body being pulled apart, not by pain, but by gravity itself, drawn into the golden light, into the pulse of the living root. Before the world vanished, I heard Master Li Xuantong's voice one last time. "Well done, child. The bridge is whole." When the light faded, there was no sound, no mountain, no hill. Only an endless plain of quiet soil under a gentle dawn. The air was fresh, the village reborn, fields green again, the well clear, and in the distance children's laughter rose once more. No one remembered the storm, the root, or the curse, except for a single plum tree standing alone on the hill, its blossoms the color of blood, and its roots whispering softly whenever the wind blew.
Chapter 40. The Last Seal of Heaven. Dawn broke softly over Kusan, as if the heavens themselves wished not to awake what now slept below. The morning fog clung to the ground,
curling between the rooftops, and for the first time in many lifetimes, the village was silent in peace. But beneath that silence, something breathed. Not with malice nor hunger, but with balance. The nameless root had fallen still, and yet I could feel it pulsing faintly through the soil, as though my own heart had stretched into the earth. The world above lived because something below now dreamed in its place. In that dream, I stood once more beside the ancient temple. It was no longer broken or veiled in mist, but radiant, its walls gleaming with living gold, its doors open to a sky of endless white. The sound of wind chimes filled the air, and at the base of the stairs stood Master Li Xuantong, smiling with the calm patience of eternity. "You've crossed the bridge," he said softly. "Then this is heaven?" I asked. He replied, "No, this is the stillness between." He gestured to the horizon, where threads of light connected heaven, earth, and shadow like a vast web. The bridge was never meant to vanish, only to rest. What was once chaos is now harmony, and you are its keeper. "Keeper?" I echoed. He nodded. "The living need the dead, just as dawn needs the night. You stand at the heart of both. What you call peace is not the end, it is the beginning of balance." From behind him, a soft light emerged. I turned and saw them. Aunt Liu, serene and young once more, my grandfather standing proud, his hands clasped behind his back, and even the faces of the nameless villagers who had fallen to the root's hunger. They smiled, not as ghosts, but as fragments of light returning home. Aunt Liu stepped forward. Her voice was warm, filled with quiet joy. "Child, you've done what none of us could. You ended the cycle not by breaking it, but by understanding it." She reached out, touching my hand. It was no longer warm, but neither was it cold. It was the touch of something beyond. "You carried both sorrow and mercy. That is what made heaven listen again." Her words trembled in the air like falling petals. The temple bells rang once, clear, resounding, eternal. The light around me began to shift, folding inward like a closing flower. Master Li raised his hand. "It's time," he said. "Your body will fade, but your essence will remain. The bridge will hold as long as your heart remembers." I hesitated. "Will they remember me?" He smiled gently. "Not your name, but the peace you left behind. Yes, that will echo for generations." I looked one last time at Aunt Liu, at my grandfather, and at the fading village below. Their faces shimmered in the morning light, blurring into streaks of gold. Then, as I closed my eyes, I whispered the last words I would ever speak as myself. "May the earth never hunger again." The world exhaled. A wind swept through Kusan, carrying with it the faint scent of incense and plum blossoms. Where once the burial hill had stood, there now lay a single stone altar, half covered in moss, bearing no name. But whenever storms rolled through the valley, villagers said they could hear faint bells ringing beneath the soil, soft, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Children would sometimes sit near the altar and hum, and though they never knew why, their songs always ended the same way, with a single line whispered to the wind. "The bridge sleeps, the world is whole." Far away, at the edge of the sea, a monk with golden eyes watched the horizon. He bowed once toward the distant mountain, his voice barely more than a breath. "Peace to you, little keeper, until the root dreams again." The waves crashed, the sky opened wide, and from somewhere deep below, a single pulse echoed, steady, gentle, eternal.